Good morning.
Morning.
There you go, hot dog. Let's see. Kim, you've got our invocation.
We bow our heads. Lord, bless our Rotary family. Help us to live in harmony, to provide support to each other when needed, and another time space for each of us to grow. Help us to take the time to receive the warmth of your grace. Guide us as we live our lives to have the right balance of work, service, rest, and play. May we be healthy, content, and giving in all that we do. Let your peace reign within our families. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our four-way test of the things we think, say, and do.
Is the truth, is it fair to all concerned, will it build goodwill and better friendships, will it be beneficial to all concerned.
Thanks, guys. Did everybody have a good Veterans Day?
Oh, yeah.
If you are a veteran in our club, you served in the armed forces at all, would you please stand up? Everybody was a veteran?
I just happened to have my field jacket from the...
Oh, wow. I'll bet it fits.
All you guys that are veterans, please come forward. I've got something for you. Now, I know you guys were all highly decorated and all that kind of stuff. But this is one more medal from me to you guys, just to appreciate it, which I appreciate. Sure, this makes an excellent ball marker if you're a golfer. It's great if you're not a golfer. There you go. Thanks. And I am so proud of myself for getting my military card. All right, thank you guys. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Walt.
You bet. Let's see, Sergeant at Arms.
44 members today and one guest, Ira Ross from Summit Rotary.
All right.
Sometimes known as Slash. Best costume at the district conference.
That was a winner. Last Thursday we had the foundation banquet, and it's a big love fest for all the people that are in Political Society, etc. Our club got 2 new banners, which I'm going to tie to my car. Basically, it's you can see for yourself. It's we weren't the only club to get this, but several clubs did. I'm very proud of our club. We average $100 in giving, and every member in our club gives. So something to be proud of, guys. 2 new banners for us. Not sure where those go, but they'll be in the closet, I guess, with our other we're going to have the Salvation Army bell ringing sign up coming up soon. Billy, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah. Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Billy.
We're helping the bike build. The next project that we're going to do will be the bell ringing. So I'm going to open up that invitation here either today or tomorrow, and look forward to everybody signing up. I am going to open it up to 1 slot first only, and then as soon as we get that filled up, we'll open up the 2nd slot, and I encourage everybody to pair up. Because you know it's a long few hours out there, so we encourage everybody to pair up. All right.
Could I just add on to that? The Salvation Army is really short of bell ringers this year, and I sit on the advisory board. So your churches or your neighborhoods or your neighbors and your friends, talk to them, get a group of people to sign up for a day. You can do it online, but if your neighborhood or your church is interested, just have somebody get in touch with me and I'll make sure they get in touch with the right person. So they have to actually pay folks to get out and ring the bell in different locations if they have enough volunteers. So it's you all know what the Salvation Army does. It's boots on the ground, and they do a lot in our community. So support them in this way, please.
Thank you. Rick, you have birthdays and anniversaries for us this morning?
Yes, I do.
Great.
That would be me.
I was looking around.
Good morning. How's everybody? We've got a couple of things going today. Club anniversaries. I saw Wayne come in. Where? Wayne? Maybe he did back here. There. I knew I had seen you. All right, my man. Let's see. You got an anniversary coming up on 15th. And how many years you been with us now?
3.
Yes, sir. That is absolutely right. Welcome. Good to see you. Howard Driggers, he didn't come in, did he?
No.
He had a birthday. You guys remember him on the 11th. So see him next time. Those big round numbers. I won't mention what it is. 50. Yeah, we had some wedding anniversaries. The Chipper, Chip Vale, where are you? Right here. Yes, sir. You are. And how many of you guys got? It was on the 11th as well.
Good round number.
It is.
30.
30. All right. Congratulations to both of you guys. You bet. Brian Kaiser, right? Same table here. You've got one. And actually, it was on the 12th. Yeah. And did you remember?
Yes.
All right. Good man. How many? 8. All right. Congratulations. Great guy. Pardon?
Is Tony the dinner recommendation? Bring out to us.
All right, so we'll be looking forward to number 9 then.
That's correct.
All right, Mr. President, that's all we have. Oh, yeah.
We missed one birthday, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Is it not our youngest member's birthday today, Charlotte?
No.
Today, I believe.
Our resident princess is having a birthday today? Oh, my God.
You know what that means?
Will you all join with me and sing happy birthday to sweet Charlotte here?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Charlotte. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Rick. Danielle, you've got an announcement about our December 5th meeting.
Sure.
Would you like to stand and...
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to offer one of the services that I extend to my customers to you guys as a way to say thank you for welcoming me into the club with open arms. So on December 5th, we're going to hold a gift wrapping event for you guys during the meeting. Tony has given us a side room, so if you guys wanted to bring gifts up to 3 per person between the hours of 6:30 and 8:30, we'll be working like elves in the side room, wrapping gifts for you guys, and they'll be available for pickup after the meeting. I'm working on sending out a flyer, and the flyer will have a link for a sign up where you'll go in, you'll click the link, you'll input your name and your email address, and you can select the number of gifts that you'll be bringing, 1, 2, or 3. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Super. Great. Thank you.
One other thing to add to that too, that our speaker that day is from Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Danielle's agreed to take donations from our club for anybody that wants to make a donation. She's doing it as a thank you, but she's also taking donations. And she has offered to give those donations to Big Brothers and Big Sisters that day. As our speaker. So, whatever you want to give, I'm sure they'll take it.
Yep. And speaking of gifts, we will be collecting toys for tots for the Santa breakfast coming up on the 19th.
Yeah, Santa breakfast is on the 19th, so be sure to bring in a unwrapped toy for that. That'll be the Santa breakfast. I will send out 2 sign-up geniuses here in the next week. One for that, and then one for the Christmas or the holiday social. Which will be on December 11th. That's a Wednesday night. Just remember, we will not have a meeting on the 12th. The social will take place at our meeting. So expect those 2 sign-up geniuses here in the next day or 2.
Thank you, Tony. How many of our members are on Instagram? Guys, we are not that old. Okay. Okay. Everybody in the club, it's a great little app, and our club basically is on it. David has been posting things, our speaker, some photographs, stuff like that. Please sign up for Instagram, like Gate City Rotary, and you'll automatically get our feed. some great posts on there that David's been doing. Really appreciate it. Let's see, we've got a little Rotary trivia, and of course a fantastic prize again. Who knows, it's a two-part question. What was the first year that Paul Harris recognition was established? It's not 1905. First year?
Dale said 36.
Dale is wrong. Sorry. Good guess though.
Australia.
Okay, here's a hint. It was also a great year for an iconic Chevy.
57.
Who said 57 first?
I think he did.
Buster did? That's true. And here's the second part. What was the amount that you had to give?
It was $1,000.
Same as it is today.
Yeah.
Right. So today, what a bargain, because $1,000 would just about buy a 57 Chevy.
Buy a third of it.
Nowadays more.
Jacks.
That's right.
All right.
Fantastic. Let's see, we have a football pool. Did you cancel it because Dallas lost?
That's right. That's right.
No, we did.
You're right
Okay.
about that.
Does anybody need, first of all, does anybody need an extra form at any table? We're good? All right. Also, next week, what I'm going to do is, the team is ranked in the top 25. I'll put their ranking next to their.
Turn this off.
Make it a little bit more normal. All right, so let's go to the M&M Awards first.
This like
First award for best, selecting the most highest score on the college side with 11 winners is Rob Midget. All right, good job, Rob. And Cheryl? You have the distinction of also 11 on the college side, but they're all losers.
You gotta know the losers to get the winners, right?
It's okay, George.
I don't. I know Alden's probably going to be good.
So for the lowest score,
That's going to be a good game.
James Pingrich started off with 5 on the college side. And he solidified his winning number here because he picked 0 right on the professional side. Good job.
That's unusual, Dave.
That is.
Ooh, I'm glad that
And
was
as a
you.
club, we really took it on the chin this week. And I mean, there was games, as you know, you picked and the other team won. There was a lot of tough picks to make. So there was a clear winner with 17, probably our roll for the year, is Rick Martin. Where are you, Rick?
All right.
There you go.
Rick!
All right, let's see. Any other top? Anything from the floor? We're going to do Happy Dollars right now.
Happy dollars. That's what I'm talking about.
Happy Dollar, my daughter made second year in a row all conference in Grimsley tennis. And Ralph is not here, but he told me his daughter Kate made all conference in field hockey for day school. So,
Give $1 for him.
You can get it back from him when
you're good, Buster. Not slip that by you.
All right, Cooper, who got some carpet this week?
I got 2 happy dollars. First of all, how about those apps? And then secondly, and I don't know if it was announced, I was out of town last week, but James Edwards' mother passed away
Oh, my.
a week and a half ago. She was 97.
Oh, my.
And she was living in Texas with James's sister who died 4 weeks ago. And so James went down there and picked her up and they flew here and she was at her home in Hickory and, you know, passed away peacefully. So,
Wow.
Birthday girl. All right.
I have a happy dollar for App State beating Carolina.
That is great.
I wanted to thank everyone for their sentiment about my mother. She died on November 1st. A very close friend of mine that I've known since I was 16. We keep in touch. He's been taking care of his mother. She died at the age of 99 on the same day at 5 a.m. and my mother died at 5 a.m.
Wow.
So we were on the phone with each other. But thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Judy.
I have Big Happy Dollar. I'm bragging on our Interact Club at Page High School. They had five volunteers to build bikes, so that was really good. They helped Page High School collected 1,500 pounds of food for out of the gardens, so we're happy about that. And the biggest part is that we have an exchange student, Marion Dewey is going to pass the smell test, so she passed the district level, and so we have an exchange student that's going to be coming up, which means we're going to have an exchange student coming in, and we'll know more about that in the spring. I'm going to need to find some host families for that, but anyway, a lot of good things going on.
So I know App in South Carolina was a big game, but there was another really big game Saturday. Who here picked LSU on the football team? Yeah, 8 years I've been waiting to give this happy dog.
All right. Bob C.
It never hurts to stay current for night flying, so I flew down to Columbia, South Carolina Saturday night. There's an airport a mile from Bryce Williams Stadium. My wife and another couple went to Appalachian, and I went to the University of South Carolina graduate school, but I was pulling for App, and it was an incredible game. And there's this ancient hangar there at the airport that I knew about, the Curtiss Wright Flying Company. They were going to tear it down and turn it into a brewery. So we ate dinner there. First time in my life I've been to a brewery and I didn't drink. What a game. It was awesome.
Wow. That's cool.
Following up on what Judy just told, I'm in the district for youth exchange, as you know, and have to say thank you to Gate City Rotary, because one of the biggest challenges we always have with exchange students is find a sponsoring club, which is the criteria number one to basically get going with an exchange student. So I've been successful to twist the arm of the club board sufficiently that Gate City is sponsoring the student. And now we're ready to go with her to basically run through the process to get her assigned to the country. So thank you, Gate City Rotary. Thank you, board.
Good deal. Very good. I just have a cautionary tale for Bobby and Bob Hayrock. Hayrock's not here today, but they're the pilots in our group. I had lunch with a guy Tuesday, military and whatnot. He has a small plane, same as Bob, same exact plane, or used to have. He hit a deer on the runway, on takeoff, totaled his plane, thing caught on fire, fried the deer. He got out with his skin, but anyway, y'all watch out. I mean, even on the runway.
Years ago,
not much left.
Years ago, there was a U.S. Air in front of me, and I was following. We both had to go around because a deer ran across the runway.
Man.
They're out there.
Wow.
I saw one this morning in my neighborhood. I wasn't here last week, but I just want to say how much fun the chili cook-off was for all of us that actually cooked. But, you know, I really appreciated all the support, you know, Chip did and the team did, the people that came out and helped get everything there and just support us while we were cooking. And then just to see so many Rotarians that day, and the Rotarians that volunteered for the beer stand for the day, that kind of got roped into that, and it was just really nice to see so many people involved and having so much fun. So thanks for the pig stuff.
That's the way it's supposed to work.
This is a happy sum for $10. 2 weeks from now, we're moving to River Landing, and I'm one of the charter members of the club and just finished 20 years of perfect attendance, but I will be a little bit more sporadic in attendance at that point because I'm entering a different phase of my life. Wow. It's been a real treat being in Gate City Road.
Well, Grandma and Grandpappy, they were sitting around, and Grandma was reading the paper, and she said, I'm just reading this article about this study that says that women have far superior verbal skills than men. And Grandpappy looks at her and goes, duh.
Who saw that sunrise this morning? What a beautiful. So I'm going to introduce our speaker. Featured in January 2017 Rotarian Magazine, New York Times bestselling author Andra Watkins chose a crazy way to launch her debut novel. She's one of the only living people to walk 444 miles down the Natchez Trace, and she did it as the pioneers did, walking, right? She did it with her wingman, her 80-year-old father. Wow. So that launched her debut, her memoir, Not Without My Father, which chronicles their experience. Andra is also an author of 4 other successful books, which she has up here, and is an active and celebrated Rotarian. In Eastern South Carolina, she's had lots of leadership roles. Help me to welcome Andra Watkins.
Before I get started, Amazon and Facebook want me to pay them lots of money to ever talk to people directly. So if you'll give me your email address, what's great about that is I'll send out occasional stuff, and I hear from all the people that I've met, and they email me back and tell me what they're doing, and it's awesome because I meet so many people. So it would be great to be able to talk to you again. If you'd like to share that with me, I won't sell it to anybody or share it with anybody, but it would be a great way to be able to hear from you again. And you'll hear at the end more why I like that. And then I won't have to pay a billionaire to talk to you. About 15 years ago, I read a book called Undaunted Courage by Stephen Ambrose. Have any of y'all read that Pulitzer Prize winning book? A couple of you. Have you heard of the Lewis and Clark expedition to the Pacific Ocean? Everybody should raise their hands. Now, I grew up in South Carolina, and I had to take U.S. history in the 8th grade down there. That's what we have to do. Do y'all have to do that here in North Carolina? Yep. Well, I didn't learn much about them or anything in U.S. history in the 8th grade in South Carolina. Lewis and Clark was this tiny, boring paragraph in my history book. They followed Sacagawea to the Pacific Ocean. They came home. That was the end. And I memorized that fact to write it on a test, because that's how we teach history, isn't it? You just memorize a bunch of boring stuff, and then as soon as you can be tested on it, you can forget a bunch of it. So I forgot about them until I picked up Undaunted Courage and read it, and I got a very different picture of that trip. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark and 31 other individuals, mostly 20-year-old dudes, the youngest was 15, they were screwing their way across North America. They were sleeping with all the native tribes because the Native Americans believed if they could get their women to sleep with these men, it would steal their power. And if you're a 20-year-old dude, you're apparently up for having your power stolen a lot. They were doing upstanding things on this trip, too. Lewis was one of America's first scientists. He was cataloging all this new plant and animal life for science. Clark's maps of that landscape, if you go Google them, they're beautiful pieces of art, but they're the seminal picture of what we know it looked like back then. But they were having a really big time on this expedition, and they were writing about it in excruciating detail in their journals. The first editor of the journals in Philadelphia, when he got them and saw all the big time that they'd bragged about having, he was horrified, and he redacted all of that out of the first edition of the journals. Imagine how many copies they might have sold if they'd been more like 50 Shades of the expedition. But he thought the American people would be really scandalized knowing these men were carrying on like that, and he took it all out. I, however, thought, wow, if they taught history like that when I was 13, I would have been fascinated. I would have been majoring in history. It was really the first time people from history came to life for me, and I wanted to learn more about them. It's also the first time I learned how Meriwether Lewis died. Does anybody know how he died or remember from reading Undaunted Courage? Syphilis, somebody said. Everybody had it, but no. If you Google Meriwether Lewis death, Google will tell you that he committed suicide on the Natchez Trace 70 miles south of Nashville, Tennessee. He was just 35 when he died. It was 3 years after the expedition ended. The suicide crowd say he couldn't handle being a politician. Imagine that. So he spiraled into depression and drink, and he shot himself once in the head, but that didn't kill him. So he shot himself again in the gut, and he died. But if you Google Meriwether Lewis murder, you can read for hours all the different conspiracy theories of who might have wanted to whack him, because apparently a number of people wanted to kill him. We don't know what happened that night on the Trace. The official position of the United States government is that he died under mysterious circumstances, so the people in Washington can't get it together and make up their minds even about that. But what we know happened that night comes from one woman who was there who changed her story 4 times between the time it happened and the time she died almost 50 years later, so she's not a very reliable witness. Nobody came out from Washington to investigate the death of this great American hero. They dug a hole and they threw him in it. They didn't dig it deep enough the first time, so wild animals dug him up and dragged him around the clearing, and they had to dig a deeper hole and put trash on it to keep the animals out. That's how we treat our heroes sometimes as Americans. That's pretty sad. He lay in an unmarked grave with trash on it for almost 50 years. In 1848, the Tennessee State Legislature decided it was appalling that this American hero was buried in their state without a marker, so they exhumed him and erected the monument that you can see in a little while on my slideshow. I thought that was sad, because we all want to be remembered for something when we're gone, don't we? I mean, that's a human thing to want, right? Lewis wrote about how he wanted to be remembered in his journals on the eve of his 32nd birthday. But who writes history?
The winners.
The winners, yes. So if you're a 35-year-old guy who dies of possible mental illness in 1809, you're definitely history's loser. So if you didn't grow up in a state that touched that expedition or one of those men, they weren't taught in all U.S. history books until the 1960s. And Lewis was not recognized for his scientific accomplishments until 1991, when William Clark was finally officially made co-captain of that expedition by his government, almost 200 years after it happened. So it took them a long time to be formally remembered. And I thought that was sad. So I wanted to do something to honor Lewis. I didn't care how he died. I was really inspired by him. I wanted to write a book about him, but I didn't want to write a history book, because you can't make stuff up when you write history books, and I wanted to make stuff up. So I decided, since he has this mysterious death, I can exhume him and hang him up between life and death. He was so young when he died. What might he do if he could do something else and have another adventure? And I exhumed some conflict from history and this man, that they hated each other in life. And I thought one of the theories of his death was that he ordered a hit on Lewis, so I thought that'd be fun. And I can set it along the Natchez Trace, because that's where he died. He can have a new adventure. And I've created a unique genre. There's not that for paranormal historical thrillers on Amazon. And agents in New York told me over and over that they wanted unique books, and I believe that. So I finished my book. I pitched it to a bunch of them, and several of them got back to me and said, wow, you really can write. This is great. But you've got to pick a slot, because we don't know how to sell this. This is too unique. The last agent who rejected it said, I love this story. It's the best thing that's come across my desk in a decade, but I grew up in Oregon, and Meriwether Lewis cannot be doing the stuff he's doing in this book. Nobody will believe it, even though I represented the book that turned Abraham Lincoln into a vampire slayer. So when I got that rejection, I thought, nobody in New York City is going to get my poor little book baby. But a small press in South Carolina said, we'll publish it. You're going to have to get people to read it. So on March the 1st, 2014, everybody was going to be able to read my book, baby. And I wanted people to read it because I'm proud of it. But how do you decide what to read? Because Oprah wasn't going to be picking it to be her book club pick, which is one of the ways people read anything these days. And none of your friends were going to have read it. No libraries were going to carry it in North Carolina or anywhere. So I had a really tall mountain to climb to get anybody to read it. So I decided I'm going to do something really audacious to launch this novel. I'm going to walk the 444-mile Natchez Trace Parkway from Natchez, Mississippi to Nashville, Tennessee, in 15-mile increments every day on the highway with cars and trucks and camper vans for 34 days, and I'll blog about it and take readers into the world of this novel and show them where I set scenes, and something will go viral on the internet because nobody walks this road. It's unique, and it'll snowball, and by the time I stagger across the finish line in Nashville, I will have sold hundreds or maybe even thousands of this book, baby. And maybe Good Morning America or somebody like that will hear about me and they'll put me on the national news and I'll sell so many copies, I'll hit the New York Times bestseller list with my debut novel. I am the smartest author ever. So even though I can't run a mile without falling over, it won't be hard to walk 15 miles a day on a highway for more than a month. I mean, it's just walking. That's not hard. So I started training on dirt trails around my home down in Charleston about 3 months before this novel came out, and I was an idiot. I had no idea how stupid I was. I had a problem with my grand plan, though. Have any of y'all been to the Natchez Trace Parkway? I knew you would have been, Guy. But, I mean, most people in most Americans hadn't even heard of it, and I do this talk all over the country. So it's this 10,000-year-old road that's older than the pyramids in Egypt, and it runs from Natchez to Nashville. It's called a trace because animals traced it out migrating. There are mound structures along it that native peoples built that are thousands of years old in some cases. It really is, as Americans, our national tunnel through time. It was the busiest highway in North America in the 17 and early 1800s. So it's pretty incredible. And it's not just the 300 or so years of history that we tend to talk about, but millennia of time. People drive it, they motorcycle it, they bicycle it. It's a federal parkway today, like the Blue Ridge Parkway, which y'all are probably more familiar with. It's managed by the U.S. government. But I was going to be walking it, and I'm girly, and I didn't want to sleep on the ground and carry all my stuff with me for 34 days. I wanted somebody to drop me off at 1 mile post and pick me up 15-mile posts later and take me to a real bed and a real shower. So I needed a wingman. And I went to my husband first because I love Michael. I didn't want to be away from him for 5 weeks doing this really hard thing to myself. But he has a really stressful job down in Charleston that still pays for my stupid proclivity to do this. So he could not take off 5 weeks and schlep me around Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. But I have all these girlfriends, and they're always complaining about their husbands and their children and their jobs, and soccer is the most stressful thing ever to hear them talk. So I went to all of them and said, you know, you could get away from your stress for a few days each and help me, and we'll have our big Thelma and Louise adventure together. It'll be great. And then you can go back to your stress. And several of them were dying to, but their husbands and children and employers weren't so enamored. So I ended up with one friend who could go with me at the beginning for 4 days, leaving a chasm of time, 30 days, and no wingman and only one name left on my scribbled out list, and it was my 80-year-old father. We all have at least one person in our lives, don't we? We're gearing up to spend time with them now, probably, over the holidays, and we're related to them, and they drive us insane. And for me, that is my 80-year-old father. I mean, he's a nightmare. We've never gotten along. He's so loud and embarrassing. He's that person where you go to their house and you grit your teeth through every second you have to be in their presence. And then as soon as it's over, you run out and say, thank God I don't have to do that again for 6 months. But I was desperate. So I sucked it up. And I drove to his house in Florence, South Carolina, and I found him in his recliner. The house is vibrating from the sound of the news because he can't hear anything and he never wears his hearing aids. He's got popcorn and peanuts all over himself and all around the chair. He's given me a big fat preview of what I'm going to be living with for 5 weeks in hotel rooms. And I zoned out on all that and said, Dad, you're just sitting in this recliner waiting to die. You don't have anything to do. And I finally decided what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be a New York Times best-selling debut novelist. And it is a parent's responsibility to help their children reach their dreams, however long it takes us to figure them out. So will you go with me and help me reach my dream, Dad? And he said, spending 5 weeks with you sounds horrible. I don't want to do that. So I hadn't done a good job of putting my reader in my story as a writer had I. I kind of made it all about me. So I went back to my dad and I said, Dad, you know, you're the biggest Southern Gothic man I know. And you have all these stories you like to tell. I've heard them all 5 billion times, but you really like to tell them to strangers anyway. And there are all these strangers in these tiny towns along the Trace who've never heard your stories. So while I'm walking 5 hours a day, you can go into those towns and do the Roy show, and they'll love you. And there are Southern dining establishments in these towns, Dad. They fry everything to death, and it tastes so good. And you can eat as much of that crap as you want, and Mom won't know, and I won't tell her. Would you like to do that for 5 weeks, Dad? And he said, I can't wait to get started. My people are waiting to meet me. So on March the 1st, 2014, To Live Forever, An Afterlife Journey of Meriwether Lewis was published, and I started walking for milepost 0 on the Trace outside of Natchez, Mississippi, and I walked for 2 days. On the morning of the 3rd day, I woke up and it was 20 degrees, sub-zero wind chill, and sleeting in southern Mississippi. I'm a lifelong Southerner. That was a significant weather event for me. I didn't want to be out in that all day. People were following this all over the world, calling, texting, emailing, saying, just quit and go home. You've probably sold all the books you're going to sell by today anyway, so we don't care whether you finish this or not. But I knew by the morning of the 3rd day how stupid this was. Remember, I said I trained on dirt trails around my home in Charleston. The entire Southern Trace goes through a swamp. I plan to walk on the shoulder, but when a road goes through a swamp, there isn't one much of the time. So I'd spent the first 30 miles walking on pavement. My hips, knees, and ankles were already on fire. I was not adding miles to a day to finish on April 3rd, but I had to be in Nashville on April 3rd because Ann Patchett, a famous author, owns a bookstore there, and she said, you can come into my store and talk about this stupidness, but only on the day you finish. And you have to talk about what it was like to walk the Trace by yourself as a woman. So I could not go into her establishment and say I quit on the 3rd day because it was cold and I was in pain. So I got out there and I walked for 2 days in sleet and sub-zero wind chill. Whatever the weather was, I was out there. A tornado warning, some significant hail one day. A windstorm was blowing me into the highway in front of cars and trucks and camper vans all day one day. By the middle of the 2nd week, I was in physical agony every second. But the physical agony was nothing compared to the agony of living with my father. He forgot to pick me up one day at milepost 135 north of Jackson, Mississippi. There's nothing there. I hadn't seen a car in 2 hours, and I didn't have a cell signal to call him. So when he finally showed up, we had a nuclear holocaust of an argument. We were both calling my mother independently, saying, you've got to come out here and save us because we're going to kill each other. And she said, ha ha, I'm not getting in the middle of that. So we went to our separate corners and avoided each other, and a couple of days later, he dropped me off at milepost 165. If you go to milepost 180 on the Natchez Trace, that is the geographic middle of Mississippi, and there's an astronomical observatory there because that is the darkest sky east of the Mississippi River, to give y'all a sense of how much nothing is in the middle of Mississippi. And I started walking from milepost 165, and at milepost 167, I got this horrible stomach cramp. Now, I'm girly, but I've gotten used to going to the bathroom in the woods. The Trace is set up for people on wheels. Some of the toilets are more than a mile off the highway, and I was not adding miles to my day to use one of those. But I was violently ill next to a pine tree at milepost 167. I was sobbing. I was too sick to go on. I got out my cell phone to call my dad to say, come get me, I can't finish today. And I didn't have a cell signal. So I went into my backpack to get out my toilet paper to clean up. And I had 2 squares because I had not checked my supply that morning. So I got out the only other thing I had with me, a big bottle of Gatorade, and I took the lid off and I dumped it around back and switched it around. If you're ever in that predicament, don't do that. So I cleaned up as best I could, got back out on the road, sobbing, looking at my phone, saying, as soon as I have a signal, I'm calling my dad and I'm telling him to come get me because I quit. This is the stupidest idea in history. Nobody's buying this novel. Nobody's following me on the news. Nothing's going viral on the internet. Nobody cares about this. And I want to go home and be a failure because this is awful and miserable. And 2 miles later, I couldn't even succeed at failing. I still didn't have a cell signal. So I collapsed in a field and said, maybe eventually Roy Watkins will wonder where I am. Might be tomorrow. Don't care how long it takes him to come find me. I quit. I can't do this anymore. And I lay there feeling really sorry for myself for about 15 minutes. Now, I'm a proud Southerner, and it was the 2nd week of March. The sky was really open and blue. It's before we get all that soupy humidity we have in the air. Everything was budding out and blooming. And I was lying in a field of thousands of daffodils. And I said to myself, I've been doing this walk like I lived my whole life. I've been rushing through every day to get finished because I'm focused on how much my feet hurt and how miserable I am. And I'm missing all the amazing things that are happening to me every day because I'm out here walking a highway nobody walks by myself. Thousands of birds were migrating. They were everywhere. A deer walked right next to me one day for a while and didn't run away. A woodpecker stayed with me all day one day, and it would plonk trees on either side of the road like we were talking. So I was having magical experiences with nature, and people from as far away as Japan were stopping and telling me their Trace stories. And I was missing all that because I was focused on the misery and the agony of what I was doing every day. We do that today, don't we? We all have these devices that are always burping and twerping and demanding our attention. We are all online arguing and screaming at each other about stuff, and it feels like we hate each other, and the news is a dumpster fire, and we have jobs that are stressful and people in our lives that are hard. And all that's our metaphorical feet hurting, isn't it? If that's what we focus on, we forget to find the amazing thing in every day. So the next time you're having a day like that, and I still have them all the time, I hope you'll remember me in that field of daffodils and pull your head up out of that and find the amazing thing. Because life is amazing. Every day of it is, if we choose to find the amazingness in it. I finished my walk right on time on April 3rd. I gave my talk at Ann Patchett's bookstore. I had some TV crews and news crews come out and interview me and put me on the news, and I sold a few copies of To Live Forever. Not enough to hit the New York Times bestseller list, but I did that with my 2nd book, my memoir about this adventure, Not Without My Father, and there's a lot of other stuff that happened to Dad and me in there that I hope you'll want to read about. But the best thing that came out of this whole experience ended up being the 5 weeks I spent with my 80-year-old dad who drives me insane. I've given this talk on 3 continents. I do it more for money now than not. I'm up here to speak to the Greensboro Garden Club tomorrow. That's what I'm doing in town. But I like to talk to Rotary clubs or anybody who will have me because I'm passionate about people making memories. We all have people in our lives like my dad, don't we? And because they're the hard people, we say, I'll do that thing someday because it's going to be stressful. And then someday becomes never when they get sick or they pass away and we're left with, wow, I wish I had. I don't want anybody to meet me or hear me speak or read my books and have a bunch of I wish I hads. We all have regrets. That's part of life. But you still have somebody that you can go out of here and say, you know, we've been talking about doing that thing. Let's do that thing now. Let's not wait. Let's turn that I wish I had into an I'm glad I did. Because I'm so glad I spent that time with my dad. We had conversations we wouldn't have had any other way, and he told me stories I hadn't heard 5 billion times. And we finally connected for the first time. And that's even more meaningful to me now because he's been in and out of the hospital for the past 2 years. And he would not be able to do this with me today, just a few years later. So we did that thing when we could, and I'm so glad, and you will be too. You do not have to spend 5 weeks in a car with a gassy old man to make a memory. You can do what a police officer in St. Louis did, and I get emails from all over the world, which is one reason why I wanted to be able to talk to you again, because I love hearing from people about what they've done with this story. This book has been published in Korean, so I hear from people in Southeast Asia, and it's just awesome to hear. But this police officer said, because of you, I took my grandmother to lunch today. She's in a nursing home now. We've never gotten along, and we had a lovely time at lunch. Got out our calendars, synced them up. We're going to lunch every month for as long as we both can. So it's that simple to make a memory with somebody. And please let me know if you do. It keeps me going to hear how you take this story about Dad and me and turn it into your stories. That's what makes it truly powerful. I've been stupid enough to write 3 afterlife stories for Meriwether Lewis and other people who died mysteriously. Hard to Die Behind Me is about Theodosia Burr Alston. If you grew up in North Carolina, you should have learned about her in North Carolina history because she was the famous daughter of the infamous daughter of Aaron Burr who shot Alexander Hamilton in a duel. She was First Lady of South Carolina at the age of 29 when she boarded a ship in Charleston where I live, and she disappeared off Nag's Head. Nobody knows what happened to her. There are multiple theories of what happened. So she gets to have a fun adventure in the afterlife with a West Point cadet who's also interesting in 1950. There's Russian espionage and all kinds of stuff in it. It's better than reading the news, so just escape all that. And then I Am Number 13 features the villain in all my novels as the narrator. James Wilkinson was, he was the biggest scoundrel America ever produced, and we don't even learn about him in school. He worked for the first 5 presidents of the United States, was head of the U.S. Army while he was selling our secrets for millions of dollars in today's money to Spain, one of our arch enemies. He committed treason his entire career, was court-martialed 3 times and acquitted, never got caught with what he was doing. So he was deliciously awful, and he gets to have a big adventure down in Honduras while he's working for Reagan in the 1980s. So you can get 1 book for $15, any 3 for $40, and you get a free voodoo dollar. You can get all 4 for $50. I have a square. I'll take your checks, and I have change, so you have no excuse. If I run out of something, you can order them, and I'll ship them to you without charging you for shipping. And I give a percentage of sales at Rotary clubs to Rotary Literacy because I'm standing here today talking to you because I read a book 15 years ago. People come up to me all the time and say, I don't know why you bother to write books because I can't remember the last time I read one. But what adventures are we all missing as human beings because we're always in a screen and we're streaming our lives. So whether you read my books or a book, go out of here and find your next adventure in a book because you never know where you might end up if you do that. If I have time for a couple of questions, I'll be happy to take questions. Or you're speechless. Thank y'all very much for having me.
I wish, David, I hope you got a picture of Chip Vail back there in the back. He was absolutely... At any rate, hey, I have one more.
You want me to post? All right, read the last three.
Oh, something else.
The last 3 are 274.
274.
274.
Wow. 220. The 220. That was way after me. 50 tickets. She picked that one off the top.
King of Diamonds. All right.
She did.
Great. We're adjourned.